Hey guys, PB here from the Home Automation Project. Welcome back to my video. This is video number 2 of my ongoing series where I show you how you can uplift your existing Home Assistant installation, both your software and hardware platform, to take it to the next level. This series is aimed at helping you create your ultimate home automation platform, both in terms of hardware and software, which allows you to create a secure, powerful and reliable home automation setup and enables you to create those advanced automations such as facial recognition, local AI, etc. Seamlessly on your setup. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install Proxmox on Intel NUC and how to set up your Home Assistant as a VM on Proxmox. A little later in this video, I'm going to explain why I chose this specific setup over other possible setups and how it helps me to quickly scale and grow my home automation platform. There's a little bit of technical learning involved in this because these are a bit of advanced setup that you can do for home automation, but it is worth it if you want to do some powerful stuff with your home automation in the long run. I'm trying to make it easy and simple in this video series by taking you step by step, going from an easier to a harder level, and hope it makes sense. So without further ado, let's get started. If you look at the official installation methods on the Home Assistant website, you will see that there are 4 methods mentioned here. You can install a Home Assistant OS, which is the full OS, which includes things like add-ons and one-click updates. Then you have the container method. Now this one is one of the technically most advanced method, and I wouldn't recommend that if you are a beginner in the space of virtualization and containerization. However, this could be a preferred method if you are already running Docker containers, for example, on a PC at your home. A little bit later in the video, I'm going to explain the differences between having operating system versus a container and what you get and what you don't get. So that should help you to take a decision. Next option you have is core. So core is your base install of Home Assistant without add-ons, without supervisor or one-click updates. So if you are new to the world of Home Assistant and just want to play around with the features such as automations and dashboards and integrations in Home Assistant, you could install a core on your laptop in a VM, for example, and give it a go. But I'm pretty sure you'll quickly outgrow this and you would eventually need to use add-ons, which is a big thing in the world of Home Assistant. And the last is supervised. It is also technically pretty advanced and not a recommended option. An example of a supervised installation is where you install Home Assistant on something like Debian. It takes the whole hardware and the operating system. However, it is susceptible to changes or updates to the underlying OS as well. I did run such an installation for more than a year and did not face too many issues. I was able to set up pass-throughs for IO ports as well. I was able to use ZigBee, Z-Wave, everything. So didn't have much issues. But if you try to use Oral TPU, this setup might cause you an issue when using Frigate. So the option I've chosen is to run Home Assistant OS on VM and then install LXC containers for other services such as Frigate, DoubleTake, Node-RED, etc. I will quickly show you now what is the flexibility which I get out of that installation versus a container installation, because these are pretty similar, but there are some subtle differences between the two installations which I would like to address before we move on to the actual installation. If you are already familiar with the differences or are familiar with how VMs and containers work, Docker containers work, you can skip the next section and you can directly go to the installation part, which is the section after that. I will leave timestamps in my video as usual so that you can directly jump to the relevant section for you. So now let's jump onto the drawing board quickly and understand the differences, the pros and cons of using HAOS on VM plus other containers on Proxmox versus setting up containers directly on the hardware. Okay, so let's try and understand the differences and the pros and cons between using a VM, Home Assistant within a VM instance versus using a Home Assistant core in a container. And I'll just go through the very basics of the differences. Obviously, it's a much more advanced topic, which I don't have the bandwidth to cover in this video, but let's try and understand the basics so that it can help you take a decision of which way you want to go. So at a high level, let's see how a VM works. So you have got this, let's say this is your container, or let's say this is your hardware. On this you have got your basic OS. Let's say it's a Linux based OS like Ubuntu or Debian. So this is your basic OS layer, and you have got the OS layer managing the underlying IO and hardware. So this is your OS and this is your IO and all other hardware details. So basically your OS manages the access to the ports and the hardware, and also it manages it has its own kernel which manages the RAM, etc. So OS manages all the resources on your machine. Now when we install something like a hypervisor, an example of which is Proxmox or a VMware. So if we look at an example, let's say it gets installed like this. So this is your let's say this is your Proxmox. So this is your Proxmox, and then if we want to install VMs on top of this, then you will have these environments which act like containers. So Proxmox allows two types of containers, so to say. So you have got a traditional VM and you have got something called LXC container, which is more of a container type mechanism. But however, Proxmox acts as your, so this is your virtualization layer, right? So what does it virtualize? So it virtualizes the hardware. That's the important difference. So what you can do when you set up this VM, you can, or LXC, you can allocate certain hardware resources like the RAM, the hard disk, the CPU cores. So let's say we set up this VM, which is your Home Assistant VM. Let's say we say 2 GB RAM. Yeah. Let's say 32 GB hard disk, and let's say 2 cores. 2 CPU cores. So this is your VM, which will and let's say the actual hardware has 4 CPU cores, let's say 16 GB RAM, I'm taking the actual example, and let's say 1 TB. So that's your real hardware resources, and this is how you virtualize that. Now the advantage of this for Home Assistant perspective is that a VM can host an entire OS of its own. So you can, for example, in a VM you can install something like, let's say, Linux or a Windows, or in Linux you can install something like Debian or Ubuntu. So you can install all types of OSs within the VM, which means that we are going to install the entire Home Assistant OS, which means we get all the benefits that comes with it. So for example, benefits of supervisor, right? With benefits of add-ons. Personally, the biggest advantage I see of this installation is I can continue to use add-ons without, and inside my HOS, so I can continue to install add-ons inside the Home Assistant operating system for simpler add-ons, such as something like a MQTT server. Let's say I can continue to use the one which is hosted within Home Assistant. It's easier to manage and easier to integrate within the Home Assistant OS, and other add-ons which are smaller and less resource intensive, and something which is way easier to manage within Home Assistant, I can continue to use here. However, if I want to install something which is a bit more powerful and I need a bit more flexibility to bring it up or down, I can install as a parallel LXC container. For example, something like Frigate, I can install it in its own container. Something like, let's say, DeepStack, or let's say DoubleTake, which are basically your AI softwares for camera work, and something like, so the list goes on, Node-RED. And additionally, I can use I can spin up these other VMs or containers, and the advantage of this setup is also like I can spin up other VMs as well on this, because this is Proxmox layer. So for example, something like Blue Iris. So remember that the Proxmox layer itself, so if you look at the layer itself, this one is Linux, right? And it will have a specific file system like ZFS. However, as you can see, we can install Windows inside the VM. So that is a big advantage of this setup. As an example, I might want to set up something like Blue Iris, which only runs in Windows, also as a separate add-on, and integrate it with Home Assistant. So that is possible in this setup, and that is probably, so we can integrate these services together with Home Assistant seamlessly. Mostly it will be through MQTT, as you do in add-ons as well, but yeah, you can do that. So this is the versatility of this setup and the advantage of the setup. So you can spin up VMs with their own OS, where you've got an OS specific add-on, or you can spin up LXC bare metal containers, which are light and which are more easier to set up and access your local GPU code, etc., which gives you easy access to the local hardware without any layers of virtualization, which kind of helps in speeding up the performance. So as an example, you have got Frigate, you have got Double Take, DeepStack, Node-RED, these kind of LXC containers, and all of this. The advantage is we use the shared resources, which means we utilize the potential of the big strong hardware, or a potential of an advanced hardware, by sharing the resources. So that is how, in essence, a Proxmox virtualization setup will look like, and that's how virtualization works, by virtualizing the hardware. So hope that is clear. Now let's look at how the containerization will work. So containers are a bit different. So containers are a bit different. You have so same, let's take the example of same. So you have got this hardware and you have got this OS, right? So you got hardware, IO, and you've got OS. Now containers, right? So these are containers. As an example, let's take like Docker container as an example, right? So this is C1, this is C2. Let's say these are your containers which are spinning up. So how they work is they virtualize the OS. That is a major difference. So they actually divide the OS, or virtualize the OS, and along with this, what it means is they help you to access the OS resources directly. Let's draw a better picture. Okay, so how they work is they kind of virtualize the OS. So which means that they have direct access to the hardware and IO resources, because they kind of containerize the OS itself, which has direct access. The biggest advantage of this is speed, obviously, and performance, right? So these are the number 1 and 2 advantage. Number 3 advantage is also that these are light. So these are very, very light. So you can install using something like a Docker Compose. You can specify exactly which packages and which libraries to install, so that you don't get unnecessary fluff. Like for example, if you think of the VM example, when we install the whole OS in here, that kind of comes with a lot of fluff, right? Because the OS has its own fluff, which we don't need. But in this case, where we are directly installing the packages here, let's say package number 1 and 2, and they have the access to the resources, so it's very light, because you only install what is necessary and deploy. And also not just install, it's also about deployment. You can control what you deploy. This is the advantage. But the disadvantage is you can only install something like core. So you do get all your basics of Home Assistant in here. So you do get your automations, you do get your devices, settings, integrations, but what you don't get is add-ons. What you don't get is supervisor. So add-ons, no. Supervisor, no. So that means you have to install every add-on as its own container, or as its own container, and then integrate it with Home Assistant. That's a lot of overhead, especially with where Home Assistant specifically is involved, and also the supervisor part. Let's not forget that, where you need to maintain your own backups, own updates and everything, along with the updates of the add-ons or the hack store and everything. You can't install hacks as well, right? So you have to literally go and find and install every add-on on its own. Now when I do this video, I'll when I show you in the next video, when we install the Frigate add-on, it can be a lot of steps. It can be a lot of troubleshooting as well, because some of the you have to understand the underlying hardware IO interaction for each of those containers, and you have to allocate resources to each of them. You have to spin them up. So yes, they're light, they're fast, they're powerful, they give you full flexibility and control, but a lot of overhead. So I find the combination of VM and LXC containers on Proxmox to be way more easy on a day-to-day basis for me, as compared to having a purely container based. The one reason you might go for this setup is when you already are using this setup and you are fairly advanced in managing containers. For you, it is like spinning up and running a container and spinning it down is like very easy with a matter of half an hour or something. Then definitely go for it. This is probably the most powerful setup that you can have. So that's at a high level the differences between the two. Obviously it's way more deeper than that. There are more pros and cons that you can read up on the internet, for example. But for me, I have been using that hypervisor setup on Proxmox with the Home Assistant OS as a VM and rest of the stuff as containers, and it has been working fine for me. So I'll go ahead with that setup. There is a website which has the complete step-by-step instruction in the Home Assistant community page. I'm going to leave a link to this one because this is really good and detailed, and it uses a set of scripts which are pretty popular for Proxmox setup, which are supplied by a person called T-Tech. So the first part of it is installing Proxmox. The steps here are exactly the same that we did for the first part of our Home Assistant OS setup, where we downloaded the Ubuntu image using Etcher. We flashed it into our USB drive and booted into Ubuntu and went and downloaded the image of OS. It's almost similar. So I'm going to skip the first few steps of installing Proxmox onto the NUC. I will show you from the step where I set up the Proxmox virtual environment, and then I configure and update it, which is a step 2 by running certain scripts, and then I install Home Assistant OS by running scripts on the Proxmox server. Let's go ahead and dive into the next steps. Right, so I've now booted up my NUC with the USB drive, which has the Proxmox image installer image, and hence it has presented me with this screen. I'm just going to leave the first option there, to enter on my keyboard, and this should start installing Proxmox. Okay, let's go to the setup now. First page you have is a license agreement. I can read through it and hit agree. Next, you've got the option of the target hard disk, and here I generally like to select the ZFS80 option because I have a plan to set up RAID later on. However, you can choose to leave it at the default option if you need so, and in advanced option I would you can increase the size of the hard disk if you want to allocate more space. I won't do it right now, but it's something which I would usually like to do. And then you can hit next, then select the country, time zone. So in my case it is going to be, so I'll use in my case it's going to be Melbourne, and leave the default as English. Go next, and here you can set up a password and a email ID. The email ID that you set up here is where you can receive some alerts. So Proxmox has its own inbuilt mail server, so it can send alerts to you over email. It is pretty useful to have that set up, so let's go ahead and do that. Let me give it some password. and an ID. Hit next. Now here you can select the domain name, and for me it is going to be a local install, and I already have a Proxmox 01, so I will put it as 02, and you can select the, if you want you can change the IP address here. I generally leave it at the default and hit next, and then you can hit install, and it will automatically reboot after successful installation. Let's go ahead and do that. Right, so I'm back on the boot options now, and I'm going to change the boot order back to the normal one, so that I don't forget that I have the first boot as, currently I have the first boot as USB. I want to change it because I might be plugging in USB drives in future into this machine, so I don't want that to happen every time it boots up. Like earlier, I'm going to take it back to NVMe option, which is the default hard disk, and then I'm going to hit save changes and exit. Yes. Okay, so the system is now rebooted, and as you can see it displays an IP on the it's going to display an IP address here, and you have the login prompt. You can log into this machine, but we don't need to use the keyboard and mouse on the NUC anymore, so we can leave the NUC connected to the Ethernet, and you can log in by using this IP address on a browser of your laptop or desktop. So let's go to my desktop, and I'm going to connect to this server now from my browser and continue the steps there. Okay, so now I'm on my desktop. That's the URL to my Proxmox server. So I'm going to enter this, and don't worry about this certificate warning that it gives. You can bypass this by registering certificate by one of the free certificate authorities if you want, but it's a local. It's going to be a local server for me, so I'm not worried about it. I'm going to hit proceed. Right, and it asks for username password. Now remember, the username for Proxmox login is by default it's going to be root, and the password is a password that we gave it when we were installing. And I'm going to log in. Okay, now there is this subscription message that will keep popping up. In the subsequent steps, we are going to run certain scripts which I showed you earlier, which are available from TTech on that GitHub, and one of the scripts is going to help us remove this subscription message. So the version that we are using is a free version, free distribution version, and it's nothing, not a illegal copy or something that we have, but it's just that you can subscribe to get more benefits or additional options unlocked on the Proxmox one. But once we run the script, we are going to register also to the community license with a free license, so this subscription message will then go off. Till then, just bear with me, and this message is going to come. Right, so now we are on the Proxmox server page, and as you can see, this is our Proxmox server node, as it is called. And next thing we need to do is we need to start a virtual machine, and then we are going to install Home Assistant on this. Right, so now that we have the Proxmox installed, first thing that we need to do is we need to check for updates. Just hit refresh, and when you hit refresh, you're going to get this message again. Don't worry about it, just dismiss it for now and let it do its thing. Yeah, and you will see that it actually ends with a fail. This is because it is trying to access the enterprise repository still, because we have not pointed it to the correct repository. We'll do that in some time after we run some scripts for that. For now, just hit close, and as you can see, there are a lot of updates pending here. So just go ahead and hit update and hit yes, enter. So system update has completed. Let's exit the command prompt for now, and after every update, as you can see, the latest update here is okay, but it's good practice to reboot the server after every update. So I'm just going to hit reboot here and just wait for the system to reboot. Okay, now my system has successfully rebooted. The way to figure out if once the reboot happens is look for the start VMs and containers status okay. That tells you that your system is rebooted, and if you hit refresh, you should not see any more updates pending here. Hit close. Yeah, there you go. So the system is now updated. Let's start running some scripts here. For that, you can go to the shell, and then we can run scripts from this website, which I talked about earlier. If you're not comfortable to run any bash scripts without knowing what is written inside, you can always go to the website, the GitHub site, and you can actually download the shell script and look into it before you run them. I'm just going to go ahead and use the scripts because they're pretty handy. So this is the script for completing the post installation process. So you can just copy it from here. So click copy, and I'm going to come here and paste, and I'm going to hit enter. Yes. The correct sources to update and install. Yes. And only available to users who purchase. Disable. Yes, we want to disable the enterprise because we haven't subscribed or purchased subscription, so we are going to disable the repository. Press access to all of the yes. Hit enter. Access to both the no subscription. Correct. Yeah. Yes. The PV test. I would say yes. This will disable the nag message. Disable nag message. Yes. Okay. Cluster, you can disable unnecessary high availability services. You can, yeah, I would go with that for now. And hit yes again. Shouldn't take that long to complete. And I'm going to hit yes. And let's wait for the system to reboot. System has rebooted now. Our next step is to install the Home Assistant VM. For that, I'm going to go back to the script, and this is the line which says run this for installing Home Assistant VM. So let's go copy this and paste this here and hit enter. And there you can see says it will create a new Home Assistant VM. Yes. Use default settings. No, I'm going to use the advanced settings. I'm going to go with the stable version here, and virtual ID I'm going to just change it to 101 just to match the 01 version, and hit enter. This I'm not going to change, just hit enter. Yeah, this cache retro default. Yeah, the host name, I'm going to change the host name to test 01. Yeah, hit enter. And yeah, host, enter. 2 CPU cores. Yeah, I'll leave it, and that's good enough for Home Assistant. And the RAM, yeah, this is the one which I wanted to update. I want to give it a bit more RAM, so 8 GB is what I'm going for. I'm going to hit OK. So bridge, OK. Address, I don't care, but you could do a cloning of the MAC address if you have an existing production instance of Home Assistants which you are already using and you want to migrate that to this one, and you don't want any integrations to break. There you should ideally retain the same IP address as your original Home Assistant instance. So for example, if you have MQTT integrations, those that could possibly break. So there are two ways to do that. Either you clone the IP MAC address of existing Home Assistant installation, and for that you will have to shut down the other instance. So do make sure that you have your backup file taken from there already and stored offline. The other way you can do it, the one which I prefer, is by going into router settings and changing the IP of my old instance to something different, and changing the IP of this one to the IP of the old instance through my router, and then rebooting the new instance. So I will be using that option. So for now I'm just going to hit OK. I don't want to set a VLAN, I don't want to do anything here, and hit yes, yes, and we're going to let it do its thing. Now the installation has completed successfully, and ideally we should have our VM up and running now. So you can see this is the VM which we just installed. It has got the 8 GB memory, 2 CPU cores, 32 GB disk size. If you want to see the behind the scene what's happening, you can hit console. Oh yeah, so this has started, and you can see that we have this is the IP address shown here. You should be able to connect to it by hitting this IP address. Let's give it a go. So let's hit enter, and as you can see it's still starting up, booting up. So give it some time till it is able to start the Home Assistant server, and once it does, we'll see a familiar login screen with the option to restore from our backup. So yeah, we'll go ahead and do that as well. Okay, so now I'm on the welcome screen for Home Assistant, and as you can see, an option of restore from backup. If you have a backup, you can use this option. Default is you can click on create my smart home and follow the steps to enter the details. I'm going to restore from my Raspberry Pi backup, so I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to upload the backup file. So I have this test instance file. I'll open it. I'll wait for the restore to happen. Okay, so it asks me in the option that whether I want to do a restore from a full backup. Yeah, I'm going to say yes, and it wants me the entire system will be wiped, which is not a problem because this is currently blank. I'm going to hit restore. Okay, so finally I'm on the login screen. Entered my credentials from the older installation. I'm going to hit login. Yeah, we can see that it has successfully pulled through. If I go to my automation scenes, I can see all my old automation to my device and services. Yeah, I can see everything that I had in my original installation. We'll cover more details around managing your Home Assistant instance from Proxmox, especially the backups, how you can do network backups frequently. One of the major reasons is the ease of creating snapshots and taking a whole image of the Home Assistant and putting it on a network drive on a regular basis. So yeah, I will definitely cover that in one of my future videos. Thank you for sticking around, and I will see you in the next one.
So that will be all for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do not forget to hit the like button. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to install Frigate as its own server in its own container and integrate it with Home Assistant along with the setup of Coral TPU, which will help you to speed up your image processing. In subsequent videos, I'm then going to cover picture recognition using double take and compare face setup on the same hardware and software, and eventually I will also add more advanced setups such as setting up your local AI, etc. So this is going to be an interesting series, and if you do enjoy these videos, do not forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Till then, stay safe and stay connected.